Hello. If you enjoyed the story, leave your comment, give it a like and subscribe. Thank you very much. God bless you. I never thought a single moment could change everything I believed about medicine, humanity, and the power of compassion. My name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell and I've been working in emergency medicine for 15 years. I've seen it all, or so I thought. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what happened on that cold Tuesday evening in November. It was around 11 p.m. when the ambulance sirens pierced through the usual hospital chaos. I was finishing up with a patient when I heard commotion from the emergency bay. The paramedics wheeled in an elderly man, probably in his 70s, unconscious and barely breathing. What struck me immediately wasn't his critical condition. I'd seen worse, but something else entirely. As we transferred him to the gurney, he suddenly grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. His eyes flew open, wild with panic and desperation. "Help, please," he whispered, his voice barely audible but filled with an urgency that sent chills down my spine. They can't know I'm here. Please, doctor, you have to help me disappear." The words hit me like a freight train. In all my years of practice, I'd never heard a patient beg to disappear from a hospital. People come here to be saved, to be found, to be healed. They don't come here to vanish. But the terror in his eyes was real, raw, and absolutely genuine. This wasn't delirium or medication talking. This was pure, unadulterated fear. My medical training kicked in immediately. His vitals were unstable, blood pressure dangerously low, and he showed signs of severe dehydration and possible internal bleeding. But even as I worked to stabilize him, his words echoed in my mind. Who was he running from? What had brought this frail, elderly man to our doors in such a state of terror? The nursing staff began their routine procedures, taking his information, checking for identification, preparing to contact family members. Standard protocol. But something deep inside me hesitated. The way he'd looked at me, the desperation in his voice, the plea to help him disappear, it all felt like a puzzle piece that didn't fit the normal picture. As I stood there watching the controlled chaos of emergency medicine unfold around this mysterious patient, I realized I was about to make a decision that would challenge everything I thought I knew about my profession, my ethics, and myself. Little did I know this was just the beginning of a story that would turn my entire world upside down. The elderly man's medical chart read like a ghost story. No identification, no insurance cards, no emergency contacts. Nothing. It was as if he'd materialized out of thin air. But what bothered me most wasn't what was missing from his belongings. It was what was there. Hidden in the lining of his torn jacket, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. A photograph. Old, creased and faded but unmistakably clear. It showed a much younger version of the man lying before me, standing next to what appeared to be a government building. But he wasn't alone. Beside him stood several men in suits, and in the background, I could make out official-looking documents and what seemed to be classified stamps. My hands trembled as I studied the image more closely. This wasn't just any government building. The architecture was distinctly reminiscent of facilities I'd seen in documentaries about Cold War-era intelligence operations. Who was this man? And why was he so terrified of being found? As I continued my examination, I noticed something else peculiar. Despite his apparent age and frail condition, his muscle memory seemed unusually sharp. When I tested his reflexes, his responses were those of someone trained in combat or self-defense. Scars on his hands and arms told stories of a life far more complex than that of an ordinary elderly man. "Doctor," he whispered when he briefly regained consciousness, "you don't understand. If they find me here, people will die. Innocent people." His grip on my hand tightened. "I've been hiding for 43 years. 43 years of looking over my shoulder, changing names, moving from place to place. I can't let it end here." The weight of his words settled on my shoulders like a heavy blanket. 43 years of hiding? From whom? And why? As a doctor, my oath was clear. Do no harm, preserve life, treat all patients equally. But as a human being, I couldn't ignore the genuine terror in this man's eyes. I made a decision that went against every protocol in the book. Instead of entering his information into our computer system, I created a false identity. John Smith, no fixed address, paying cash for treatment. It bought us time, but I knew it wouldn't last long. Hospital administrators would eventually ask questions, and security cameras had already captured his arrival. That night, as I sat by his bedside during my break, he told me fragments of his story. Pieces of a puzzle that painted a picture of government experiments, classified operations, and a cover-up that had cost lives. He spoke of being a whistleblower before the term even existed, of trying to expose something so dangerous that powerful people would kill to keep it secret. I should have dismissed it as the ramblings of a confused elderly man. But something in his eyes, something in the way he spoke with such precise detail about events from decades ago, made me believe every word. And that belief was about to change everything. The next morning brought visitors I never expected. 2 men in dark suits arrived at the hospital, flashing badges and asking questions about our John Doe patient. They claimed to be from a federal agency I'd never heard of, investigating a person of interest who might have been admitted the previous night. My heart pounded as I maintained my composure, telling them we had no patients matching their description. But I could see in their eyes that they didn't believe me. They knew something and they weren't going away easily. After they left, I rushed back to my patient's room only to find it empty. Panic set in until I noticed a small note tucked under the pillow. Basement storage room B12. Come alone. My hands shook as I read those words. How had a man barely able to walk just hours ago managed to disappear from a secured hospital floor? I found him in the storage room, looking surprisingly alert despite his condition. They found me faster than I expected, he said, his voice stronger now. Dr. Mitchell, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you, because lives depend on it, including yours now. He began to unfold a story that seemed like something out of a spy thriller. In 1982, he had been Dr. Robert Chen, a biochemist working on a classified government project called Operation Mindbridge. The project involved developing chemical compounds that could influence human behavior and memory, essentially mind control substances. We thought we were working for national security, he continued, his voice heavy with regret. But I discovered they were planning to use our research on American citizens. Innocent people were going to become test subjects without their knowledge or consent. When I tried to expose it, they made me disappear. Officially, Dr. Robert Chen died in a car accident in 1983. The implications of what he was telling me were staggering. A government cover-up spanning 4 decades, involving human experimentation and murder. But why was he surfacing now? What had changed after all these years of hiding? Because they're doing it again, he answered as if reading my thoughts. The technology has advanced, but the project never stopped. They've been perfecting it and now they're ready for large-scale implementation. I have evidence, documents, recordings, proof of everything. But I'm dying, Dr. Mitchell. This old body can't run anymore. He pulled out a small device from his jacket, an encrypted USB drive. Everything is on here. Names, dates, locations, proof of what they've done and what they're planning. But I need someone I can trust to make sure this information reaches the right people. As I held that small device in my hands, I realized I was no longer just a doctor treating a patient. I had become a guardian of secrets that could topple governments and save countless lives. But I was also now a target. Those men in suits would be back, and next time they might not be so polite. The elderly man, Dr. Robert Chen, looked at me with eyes that held both hope and sorrow. I'm sorry for involving you in this, but you're the first person in 43 years who chose to help rather than turn away. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Little did I know the most shocking revelation was yet to come. As Dr. Chen continued his story, he mentioned something that made my blood freeze. The original test subjects, he said quietly, were chosen from specific demographics. Young professionals, healthcare workers, people in positions of trust and authority. They wanted to see how the compounds would affect decision-making in critical situations. A chill ran down my spine. What kind of healthcare workers? I asked, though part of me already dreaded the answer. Doctors, nurses, medical students. They targeted teaching hospitals, residency programs. The subjects never knew they were being tested. The compounds were administered through various means: water supplies, air conditioning systems, even medical supplies. My mind raced back to my medical school days, to the teaching hospital where I'd done my residency. St. Mary's Medical Center. The same hospital where my mother had worked as a nurse in the early 1980s. The same hospital where she'd begun experiencing the strange symptoms that doctors could never explain. Dr. Mitchell, Chen said, studying my face carefully, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. My mother, I whispered, my voice barely audible. She worked at St. Mary's Medical Center from 1981 to 1984. She started having memory problems, personality changes, episodes of confusion. The doctors ran every test imaginable, but they never found a cause. She died young, at 52, from what they called early-onset dementia. Chen's face went pale. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder I hadn't seen before. With trembling hands, he opened it and began flipping through pages of names, dates, and locations. Suddenly he stopped, his finger pointing to a specific entry. Margaret Mitchell, RN, St. Mary's Medical Center, subject number 247, compound series C7, administered via ventilation system, nursing station 3 East. The world seemed to stop spinning. There, in black and white, was my mother's name, listed among hundreds of others who had been unknowingly subjected to experimental mind control substances. My mother hadn't died from a mysterious illness. She had been murdered by her own government, used as a test subject in an illegal experiment. "I'm so sorry," Chen whispered, tears forming in his eyes. "I tried to stop it. I tried to warn people, but by the time I realized the full scope of what they were doing, it was too late for many of the subjects." Rage and grief crashed over me in waves. Everything I had believed about my mother's death, everything I had accepted as a tragic medical mystery, had been a lie. She had been sacrificed on the altar of some twisted government experiment, and the people responsible had never faced justice. "Who ordered this?" I demanded, my voice shaking with fury. "Who made the decision to use innocent people as test subjects?" Chen hesitated, then pulled out another document. The project director was a man named Director William Harrison. "But Dr. Mitchell, you need to know, Harrison didn't disappear like I did. He continued his career, moved up in the government hierarchy. He's still alive, still in power, and still continuing this work." He handed me a recent newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Dr. William Harrison nominated for Surgeon General." The photograph showed a distinguished-looking man in his 70s, smiling confidently at the camera. "The man who killed your mother," Chen said quietly, "is about to become the highest-ranking medical official in the country. And with that position, he'll have the power to implement Operation Mindbridge on a scale we never imagined possible." As I stared at Harrison's photograph, I felt something inside me change. This was no longer just about helping a desperate patient or uncovering a historical conspiracy. This had become personal. The man who had destroyed my family was about to gain unprecedented power, and I was perhaps the only person in a position to stop him. But I had no idea that the most shocking revelation was still to come, one that would challenge everything I thought I knew about my own identity. The next few hours passed in a blur of planning and preparation. Dr. Chen and I worked together to copy the files from his encrypted drive, preparing to send the evidence to journalists, congressional investigators, and international human rights organizations. But as we worked, I noticed him studying me with an odd expression, as if he was wrestling with some internal decision. "Dr. Mitchell," he finally said, his voice heavy with emotion, "there's something else you need to know. Something I should have told you from the beginning, but I wasn't sure how you'd react." I looked up from the computer where I'd been organizing the files. "What is it?" He pulled out one final document from his jacket, a birth certificate, yellowed with age. "Your mother wasn't just a random victim of Operation Mindbridge. She was specifically targeted because of her connection to me." My hands trembled as I took the document. The name on it read Sarah Chen Mitchell, and listed as the father was Dr. Robert Chen. "That's impossible," I whispered, staring at the paper. "My father died before I was born. My mother told me he was killed in a car accident when she was pregnant with me." "The car accident was staged," Chen said quietly, tears streaming down his face. "I am your father, Sarah. When I tried to expose Operation Mindbridge, they threatened to kill both you and your mother unless I disappeared completely. I agreed to fake my death to protect you both, but I never stopped watching over you from a distance." The room seemed to spin around me. Everything I had believed about my life, my family, my identity, it was all built on lies designed to protect a government secret. "You've been alive all this time? You let me grow up thinking I was an orphan. It was the only way to keep you safe," he said, his voice breaking. "But they killed Margaret anyway, using her as a test subject to send me a message that no one I cared about would ever be truly safe. I've spent 43 years living with that guilt, watching you from afar, proud of the doctor you became but unable to be part of your life. As the shock began to wear off, pieces of my life started making sense in a new way. The anonymous scholarship that had paid for my medical school. The mysterious benefactor who had ensured I got into the best residency program. The feeling I'd always had that someone was watching over me, protecting me. You've been helping me all along, I realized. He nodded. I couldn't be your father in person, but I could make sure you had every opportunity to succeed. And now, seeing the compassionate doctor you've become, I know I made the right choice. You're the only person I trust to finish what I started. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the hospital. Security guards were running through the corridors, and I could hear helicopters circling overhead. They had found us. Sarah, my father said urgently, pressing the USB drive into my hands, you have to go. Take the evidence and run. Don't trust anyone in authority. Harrison's people are everywhere. I'm not leaving you, I said firmly. We'll face this together. He smiled sadly and shook his head. I'm dying anyway, sweetheart. The cancer has spread too far. That's why I finally decided to surface. But you have your whole life ahead of you and the world needs to know the truth. As footsteps approached the storage room, he pulled out a small device I hadn't seen before. This will give you about 10 minutes before they can track you. Use the service elevator to the parking garage. There's a car waiting, blue Honda, license plate starts with RCM, my initials and yours. The door burst open just as I slipped out through a maintenance hatch. The last thing I saw was my father, Dr. Robert Chen, standing tall and defiant as armed agents surrounded him. Hello, William, I heard him say to someone I couldn't see. It's been a long time. Now 6 months later, I'm recording this story from a secure location. The evidence has been released, Director Harrison has been arrested, and Operation Mindbridge has been exposed to the world. My father died in custody, officially from a heart attack, though I suspect the truth is far more sinister. But his sacrifice wasn't in vain. The truth is finally out and the victims of government experimentation are finally getting justice. As for me, I've learned that sometimes the most important decision a doctor can make isn't about medicine at all. It's about choosing to do what's right even when it costs everything. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen Mitchell, and this is the story of how I learned that helping one desperate patient can change not just their world, but the entire world itself.